down to this. Maybe it's just me. I mean, the sun is out. It's finally, and I have no idea, I think this is probably like a 3-hour reprieve, but it finally stopped raining. In the words of the late, great, not late, I'm sorry, I was thinking of Shigeaki Hattori, who unfortunately we just got word passed away in the Indy 500 ranks, historic driver. In the words of the great Howdy Holmes, who I just saw at Thermal Club, actually, and still is around the racetrack a lot, Howdy Holmes, who has the record, by the way, for the most starts in an Indy 500 career without a DNF. Howdy Holmes, who drove the Jiffy Mix car, one of the great lines in 500 history during a rain delay when they said, Howdy, what do you think? And he said, I think it's a pretty good day to go take your fish for a walk. And that's exactly what this weekend was like. It was brutal, man. Just nonstop rain and just drab. Like, you look so forward to the weekend. And, all week, everybody's working for the weekend, right? And then you get to the weekend and you're like, really? Just rain nonstop. Nonstop. And that's kind of what the Final Four, to me at least, and maybe I'm wrong, but it felt like that going into it. You wait all year, all season. You wait all March for the buildup of Selection Sunday and the tournament and the Final Four, and then the Final Four arrives, and you're like, really? Florida, Auburn, Houston, Duke? Okay. We go to dinner, and Shannon says to me, so who are we rooting for? Who do you like here? And I said, Shannon, I'm not going to lie to you. It would be like me saying to you, you get to choose whether we're going to live the rest of our life in North Dakota, Nebraska, Mississippi, or West Virginia. Okay? West Virginia is kind of nice, by the way. But the games themselves then proved me wrong because they were fabulous. 2 great games leading up to tonight's national championship. We'll talk about, the Kelvin Samson storyline, certainly. But that wasn't even from a basketball standpoint, the best part of the weekend. At least locally speaking. Because they were 2 fabulous games. Great games. But how about last night? And yes, I realize the weekend began on Friday night, which, am I the only one that feels this way? Eddie, you tell me.
Good afternoon, Jake. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. The sun's out. It feels to me anymore, and I don't know if this is just the shift that we work. I don't know if it's my age. I don't know if it's the world that we live in now where, because of social media and other such things happen to be coming and going past us like at flying pace. But now, when we get to a Monday, Friday feels like 3 weeks ago.
Right?
Is that just me?
No. Feels like, it was like 2 weeks ago.
I mean, when the Pacers played the Utah Jazz, correct?
Sure. I can't even remember.
Yeah, I think it was Utah. When they played the Utah Jazz on Friday, that feels like 3 games ago. And since then, what we know for the Pacers is this. Pascal Siakam, as we had anticipated at some point was going to be the case, was rested for a game. And I know that he is dinged up, but I think rest and fatigue, fatigue and just getting him up to speed, pardon the pun, are as much a part of that as his being, like the elbow, I know is a big thing, but I think it was more Rick Carlisle is aware, look, this guy, we need to get him fresh for the playoffs, for the postseason push. Mm-hmm. So he sits out against Denver. Denver, obviously, and Jokic is unbelievable. But what's interesting is in his last 3 games, where he has had triple-doubles in an absurd statistical anomaly way, including yesterday. What did he end up going for? Like 40, 19, and 10 or something like that?
Yeah, it was something ridiculous, yes.
And yet they're 0-3 in those games.
They've lost 4 straight, too.
Yeah, I mean, but still a very good team. And to go on the road with no Siakam, a huge win for the Pacers. And there are 3 things about that game last night that I loved. Number 1, I loved the fact that, and this happens a lot, I have always felt this way about road games. And it sounds odd, I realize. But I remember I was on a really good team in high school. Really good team. At one point, we were 20-0. Not a varsity team, mind you. Okay, but we were really good. And I was not a mainline player in practices and things like that. I mean, yeah, like getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning on Saturday to go practice was not fun. I didn't enjoy it. However, I most like going through all of those things and the things that were not fun about being an athlete and being on a team. You always looked for the things that made the payoff. And for me, the payoff always was getting off the bus on road games or away games when you're in high school. They're not road games, but away games. Getting off the bus with all of your teammates and knowing that people are looking at you like sizing you up as you're walking into the gym. And when you're 20-0, there's an element of swag that comes with that, right? Not for me, but for being vicariously part of it. But there is, and I think if you played sports, you get what I'm saying here. No matter what level you're talking about. I mean, it could be, I'm not one of those guys that's like, you had to be in a locker room in the Division. No, I mean, no matter what line you're in, it's when you're removed from your normalcy that then you feel like that bond and that connection of a true team. And I think sometimes road games and road wins, and in particular heading into the postseason, for the Pacers to right now get a really good quality road win on number one, a game that was like this weird outlier where it's just you just go on the road for a game to play Denver, a team that has recently won an NBA title, a team that has a multiple MVP on their floor, a team that has good players sprinkled throughout. And you go on the road for that, and your one of your stars is out, and so therefore you don't even expect, there's no expectation going into that game. But it is the perfect medicine or the perfect B12 shot for the Pacers heading into the postseason because it rallies them together as a group. And you could see that. You could see late in that game, if you watched it yesterday, that they literally played more Jokic is an unbelievable player, and the Nuggets are fantastic, but the Pacers played as a closer unit as a team down the stretch last night than did Denver. And the unity and, in addition to that, the contribution from all across the board, whether it be T.J. McConnell getting a steal or hitting one of his unorthodox, I can't believe he's taking that penetration like pull-up jumpers, or Nesmith hitting big shots, or, Halliburton hitting a big three when they most needed, or a big shot, I should say, when they most needed down the stretch. I mean, on and on and on. Miles Turner raining threes from all over. All of it coming together, but the cohesiveness. At one point, there was a play late in the game, about 4 minutes left, where I think it was Nesmith scored. Denver called a timeout, and T.J. McConnell and Nesmith, and then the third guy that I'm about to mention, are all at the midcourt line, and they're like chest, punching one another. I mean, they're rallying together, and that's what I loved about that win. That was a unifying win that you need heading down. Not that they needed that, but it is a truly powerful message there to the team heading into the postseason. Now, number two that I liked, I mentioned, they were shooting the basketball and scoring from a wide array of areas. And if you were Denver, you didn't know who it was that was going to hit the next big shot. I mean, Obi Toppin. What have we said a billion times about Obi Toppin? Obi Toppin, I think I said it literally last Thursday. The thing I love about Obi Toppin is when Obi Toppin reports to work, he goes in and instead of punching the time clock, he pulls the assignment card for that day of what role he needs to be. You need me to be a starter that shoots threes? Cool, I'm on it. You need me to be a defensive stopper in situational rotation, for a total of 12 minutes for the game, cool, I'm on it. You need me to run the floor and simply do a lob from Halliburton to get the crowd into it, cool, I'm on it. And once again yesterday, when his number was called because no Siakam, Toppin was huge. 22 points, shoots the ball from the outside. Neesmith continues to play well. But you know the next guy that I'm going to mention, Eddie. You know the next guy that I'm going to mention.
T.J. McConnell.
No.
I know where you're going.
I think now I can officially say it. I was never wrong about this guy.
Oh, you were wrong.
Let me finish. I was never wrong about this guy because I never definitively stated that something was the case. I had said that I had concern that we were headed towards a direction of it. I don't think I was alone in that. But before I ever made a conclusive, definitive statement about it, things started to turn. And the comparison that I thought of last night and the comparison that I probably have mentioned several times on this show about this player. If you are a fan of Indianapolis sports, and if you've been a fan of Indianapolis sports for 20 years, it's hard to believe it's been that long. The athlete that I'm going to compare, and I hope that this player has 60% the career of the comparison I'm about to make. When Reggie Wayne was drafted out of college from Miami, he was the all-time leader in receptions at the University of Miami as a football player. He was not a guy that was seen as the breakout behind the defense play of a Michael Irvin who had played there. There had been other great receivers that had come out of Miami, but Reggie Wayne was seen as a steady Eddie receiver that was going to be a dynamic complement to Marvin Harrison. And in his rookie campaign, Reggie Wayne did not have any consistency. At times had games that were very similar to what we just saw from A.D. Mitchell. And it was like, what did they draft a bust? And there was a lot of conversation about whether or not the Pacers drafted a bust. And even into year number 2 for Reggie Wayne, he was just kind of going through the motions. And then he gets his first career touchdown in Houston on like a tip pass. And his confidence, you could see it happening before your very eyes where you're like, wait a minute, I think he's starting to figure things out and he's starting to understand routes a little bit better and whatever else. And then the rest is history. You can physically see the game slowing down for Jarris Walker. Jarris Walker now has developed himself into the kind of player where it used to be that when Jarris Walker was on the wing and the ball would come out to him, it required him to catch the pass, turn, square up, dribble once to get himself re-squared, look at his feet, check his elbow, check his shoulders, and then shoot. Now, all of a sudden, of late, and yes, I'm not talking about he's not been a 25-point-per-game scorer off the bench, but situational scoring. He hit 3 trays last night. He only took 3 of them. All 3 of them were throughout rotation where the ball reversed, and there wasn't a lot of time necessarily to get the shot off, but you knew as soon as he lets go of it, you're like, that's going in. He is a very good outside shooter now. Now, will this last forever? I don't know. But I think now we can say that the learning curve stuff is behind Jarris Walker, and he is now at the point, I think, from a confidence standpoint, where he's going to give you quality minutes, 15, 20, 25 minutes. He is such a new wrinkle for the Pacers heading into the postseason. There's no way that Milwaukee or Boston or Detroit, when they have their Pacers scouting report, I guarantee you Jarris Walker is very low on that list. Now, is that to say that he is going to be a guy that is going to break into rotation and be a starter or a sixth man and give them 25 a night? No. But his ability to defend at different positions, and then people play off of him. You can't play off of him anymore. You just can't. And so if now all of a sudden that it's an additional piece that you have to be aware of defensively when the ball is working around, then look what that does for a Halliburton to then reverse it back over and get him an open look. And we know what happens with Halliburton once he gets a little bit of juice underneath him with his shot and lightning comes in a bottle, then that opens everything up. 14 assists last night, didn't necessarily look for scoring per se, but he's getting other people involved. I thought it was a great win. Magic number now is 2. The magic number is 2, and that magic number is between the Pacers and Milwaukee. Detroit is not in that mix because of tiebreaker situations. So, well, Jake, I heard you mention a magic number. What's that mean? What that means is this. Any combination of a Pacers win or a Bucks loss for the rest of the regular season that adds to 2, the Pacers will clinch the number 4 seed. That seems like an absolute given. If you look at the Pacers' remaining schedule, okay, so their remaining schedule with, what do they have, 5 games left, 4 games left? 4 left. 4.
4, yeah. 3 home, 1 road.
They host Washington tomorrow night. Magic number of 1. They host Cleveland on Thursday. Tough game. They host Orlando on Friday. Ding, 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 ding. Orlando's been a tough matchup, though. But what about Milwaukee and Milwaukee's remaining schedule? Okay, so let's just say that the wheels come off for the Pacers. And let's say all of a sudden things just don't go well for them heading down the stretch. Giannis didn't play yesterday. I think that was precautionary. Remaining schedule for the Milwaukee Bucks, they need 2 losses. If the Pacers were to lose out, the Bucks have to lose 2 of these games. Hosting Minnesota. Eddie, what do you think? Win or loss for Milwaukee in that game? Hosting Minnesota.
I will say that is a win for the Bucks.
Hosting New Orleans.
Should be a win. They went down to the wire last night.
At Detroit.
Ooh, I will go loss.
Okay. Hosting Detroit.
I will go win.
So if there's 1 loss remaining for the Bucks, that means only 1 win is needed for the Pacers.
Correct.
And you've got Washington and Orlando and Cleveland, all 3 at home, and then at Cleveland.
Now, worth noting with Cleveland, their magic number to clinch the number 1 seed is 1. So a combination of a win for them or a loss by Boston means they are the number 1 team of the Eastern Conference. And by the time the Pacers play them on Thursday night, or then again to end the season on Sunday, are we looking at a situation where Cleveland is
playing the Akron G League team?
Yeah, where they're starting to rest Donovan Mitchell, who, by the way, left that game momentarily yesterday,
right?
With an ankle injury, yes.
How bad was that? Did he return?
He did return,
okay.
Yes.
Man, ankles, though, I'm telling you. A lot of times ankle injuries you don't realize until after the fact. Like you have an ankle injury, and you can play through it, and then that night, all of a sudden, softball. You ever twisted or sprained an ankle, Eddie?
Yes.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal. NFL draft is what, 2 weeks away?
I think 2 weeks from Thursday, yeah.
Has this been, of the last 15 years, has this been the least chatter moving into the draft?
The least hyped up NFL draft?
I think a big part of it is this. I think a big part of the NFL draft, the NFL in general, Stars League, right?
Sure.
What position is the biggest star in the NFL?
That would be quarterback.
So when you don't have the conversation of a quarterback front-loaded draft, the level of interest in said draft drops drastically, right? Now, I don't know, and it will be interesting because this is the year 1.25 million people are going to be at the draft, which that part's good, right? But
are we sure it's 1.25 million there in Green Bay this week or in 2 weeks?
It'll be 2 million by the time it's all said and done.
How many spotted cows are we drinking from Indy, Jake?
No. Well, actually, in Green Bay, you're right. Because if it's in Milwaukee, it's got to be one of the Milwaukee beers. But in Green Bay, it probably is totally spotted cow, right? Do you like the spotted cow?
I do. Remember last year when we got those emails saying, thanks for your attendance? I didn't know I was there.
I do remember that. See, I'm looking right now, and I don't believe this there's no way. Is this right? I'm looking at an updated NFL.com mock draft. Now, I have a theory here. Do you have the tinfoil hat theory by any chance? Thank you. NFL.com on their mock draft has the following as the top 3 picks. Number 1, Cam Ward, quarterback out of Miami. Number 2, Travis Hunter, Heisman Trophy winner out of Colorado. Number 3, Shedeur Sanders, quarterback, Colorado. Is that really what is believed right now to be the top 3 picks in the draft? Or is NFL.com throwing that in there because it's needing people to be excited about the fact that the Heisman Trophy winner and the 2 big-name quarterbacks are the ones that are expected to be, if they put that out there, in the top 3? I don't think in any way, shape, or form that is expected, right? Now, this from Pro Football Focus.
There's been a lot of chatter lately with Shedeur apparently being like promised pretty much he's going to the Giants, but there have been a lot of chatter also on the other way saying that he's going to fall in the draft.
Yeah, here's somebody that says Travis Hunter's going to the Giants. Abdul Carter from Penn State is clearly a top-line pick. And I know Cam Ward is Tennessee's in quarterback need, and Cam Ward is a dynamic talent, no doubt about that. As many people say, is Cam Ward a year in and year out number 1 overall pick? Maybe not. But this particular year, maybe he is, just because it is such a down year for the quarterback position. But the latest, and I mean, mock drafts, what I always say, I mean, they're good to mock, right? But Sanders, I think the narrative or the thought process, narrative is an overused word. The conventional wisdom is that Sanders may slide lower to out of the first round. But it's in the best interest of the NFL to build it up of Deion Sanders' kid. I mean, he's obviously comes with a lot of glitz and glamour, a lot of flair, etc. Did you watch the game Saturday night, Eddie? The Final Four games?
I did.
Something happened over the weekend. Something happened over the weekend that made me think to myself, man, do people have short-term memories. People so easily forget sometimes the attention to detail. I understand it, but it takes a very common point, a very common belief, a very understandable belief, and immediately dismisses it because you say to yourself, you're not paying attention to all of the facts. I think sometimes we get tripped up by the actual facts when we look back on certain situations when it comes to sports, and in particular in the world of college sports. You know, sports in general, over the course of time, things fade a little bit. For example, Alex Ovechkin breaks Wayne Gretzky's career goals scoring mark.
And the exact number of games that Wayne Gretzky played.
And it is incredible, isn't it? But I saw a lot of people that were like, oh, he's the all-time points leader in the NHL. No, he's not. That still belongs to Gretzky because you factor in assists as well. And that Gretzky's greatness to me, and maybe I'm wrong here, but and I'm not taking anything away from Alex Ovechkin in any way, shape, or form. It's a tremendous accomplishment. And anytime something like that in sport happens, it's very cool. But I'm not a hockey enthusiast through and through. But Wayne Gretzky being the all-time goals scoring leader in NHL history was not the statistic about him that makes him so unique. The thing that since the day that he hung up the skates, Wayne Gretzky is most known and people are in awe of is the fact that his career assist mark is incredible. He doesn't need a single goal to still be the all-time points leader in NHL history because of how many assists he had. His vision to set up plays were more so revered and admired than his ability to finish plays. That's the thing about Gretzky. It doesn't take away from Ovechkin's accomplishment in any way, shape, or form. But I think we forget about that as time goes by. And as I was watching the Final Four, and as I was reading the comments about the Final Four and the matchup tonight, I realized that there was something happening locally here within 465 within the 317-812-765 area codes about the Final Four that made me realize that people have short-term memories, or that from a local standpoint, the impact of tonight's game, locally speaking, people already have forgotten the realities of a major, major tie-in. I'll explain what I'm talking about with that next. interesting when looking at the national championship matchup between Florida and Houston tonight, which that game, if I'm not mistaken, that starts at 10:30 Eastern, right?
Are you being serious or are you being flippant?
I think it is. Isn't it at like 9 o'clock tonight?
I think it's at I thought it was at 8:49.
Which is 9, right? I mean, by the time it gets going.
8:50.
I mean, I recall vividly when Houston was in the national championship game. As a matter of fact, the last national championship game for Houston, I believe, would have been 84, right? When they lost to Houston or to Georgetown.
Houston lost to Houston. That's amazing.
I know. But in 83, the game where they lost on the Lorenzo Charles dunk for NC State, that game was at the Pit in Albuquerque. And so it started at like 9 o'clock also Eastern time. And I remember being at Little League baseball practice and, all of us talking about the game itself and how none of us were going to be able to stay up late enough.
What team were you on?
I was on the Giants that year.
Okay.
In the minors at Allisonville Little League. I was on the Indians for the major minors, non-PC era. And then the Red Sox, sponsored by Love Heating and Air, by the way, 317-353-2141. The Red Sox in the majors. But the A's and the White Sox were the two best teams in my Little League years, by the way.
Because of Ricky?
No, I'll tell you what. Steve Tucker threw a slider and Lauren Zelaskowski threw a curveball in Little League. This is back before travel baseball when everybody had, the number one All-American fourth grade player on their team. Those guys were unbelievable.
That is a baseball name.
Burke Fox. That's a baseball name, isn't it?
I need that other name again.
Lauren Zelaskowski?
Yes.
Oh, unbelievable. Left-hander.
Sounds like a southpaw.
Jeff Canada was on the mound once, and he hit a kid in the helmet, the batter before me, and I got up there and my knees were knocking. Jeff Canada was that kid in Little League we all knew that he was like Kelly Leak, looked like he was 25. At any rate, I digress. So I just remember nobody's parents would let them stay up late enough to watch the Houston-NC State game, and it didn't matter because it was an automatic that Houston was going to win, 5-slam-a-jamma. And, of course, one of the great upsets in college basketball history. But it's interesting with this matchup because you have Florida, who, in the last 20 years has back-to-back titles on their resume and has been a perennial top 4 seed. And yet, of multiple champion basketball programs of the last 40 years, the one probably that people would least remember as a multiple champion is Florida. And of multiple Final Four competitors, the one that most people would least guess has never actually won it is Houston, because they've had multiple great eras. Obviously Elvin Hayes and the epic matchups with Lou Alcindor in the Astrodome, and the reason that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wears goggles, right, Eddie?
Yes.
When you see video of him, you see him wearing goggles in the NBA. The reason he wore goggles is because he had a scratch in his eye that happened against Elvin Hayes and UCLA in the 69 season. And then in that 69 Final Four, Houston and UCLA played, and then Purdue was in that Final Four as well with Rick Mount.
Did you see this, by the way, after that win for Houston against Duke? Hakeem Olajuwon was trying to get on the court to celebrate with him, and the security guard wouldn't let him on the floor.
You know what? It's funny you mentioned that because they showed Olajuwon in the crowd a couple of times before I realized it was Olajuwon. Which is kind of fitting because Olajuwon is undoubtedly. Now, I will plant this flag on it and stand on this till the cows come home.
One of the most underrated.
Of the last 30 years, Hakeem Olajuwon is the most underrated great in any of the 3 major pro sports. Hakeem Olajuwon is one of arguably of the last 30 years in basketball. Well, I guess it's been 30 years ago since they won it. 35 years. Hakeem Olajuwon is arguably one of the 5 greatest players. He was unbelievable. Unbelievable. Great player. But yet when they showed him in the crowd, I mean, I hadn't seen him in a while. I'm like, oh, man, that's Hakeem Olajuwon. But Houston is a team that I think people don't realize that they haven't won it. And Florida is a team that you have to be reminded has won it in the consistent fashion in which they have. But that Duke game, and Cooper Flagg is clearly a great player, and Duke has other great players on the roster for certain. But what we saw in that Duke game and against Houston, I think shows a little bit about what we see here locally with Purdue and Indiana notably, and Butler to an extent. Duke is unbelievably talented, and Cooper Flagg is a generational player. It's hard to believe that Cooper Flagg should be a senior in high school right now. I saw somebody say, Christian Laettner wouldn't have missed that shot. And I'm like, true, but when Christian Laettner hit that shot against Kentucky, he was 22 years old and had played in 120 games at that point and was on his way to his fourth Final Four and had won a national championship by then. Cooper Flagg, at the same age that Cooper Flagg is right now, Christian Laettner was just getting ready for his first game as a senior in high school. I mean, for Cooper Flagg's age to be that unflappable over the course of that game is very impressive, and he made several unbelievable plays. And yes, it was a questionable over-the-back call. But Houston's defense was so stifling that and Duke's inexperience finally showed in the last 90 seconds of that game. Whether you want to attribute it to that or not, the bottom line is Houston is a team that has guys that have been there for a long time, that understand the system, that don't get rattled, and just keep doing what they do. And I'll get into in a minute how that relates to teams here locally, because there is something that can be taken from that. But Kelvin Samson, I don't like Kelvin Samson at all. And I don't just mean as I respect the heck out of him as a basketball coach. And I don't think that Kelvin Samson is, well, let me back that up. I had very limited dealing with Kelvin Samson when he was the coach at Indiana. But the limited dealing I had with him, his arrogance was off the chart, more so than probably any coach or athlete I've ever been around. And it wasn't just my own personal experience in that makes me draw that conclusion. I talked to other people as well that worked at Indiana that were around Kelvin Samson on a regular basis. And I never heard anybody say anything other than, man, that guy thinks really highly of himself. I think the thing that I've told before that illuminates a little bit what I'm talking about. When Bob Knight was the coach at Indiana, he had a program that he would do where he would sign like 200 basketballs at the beginning of the year, and those basketballs would be used by the Big Red Gift Shop and then the different philanthropical aspects of Indiana basketball to give to charities or give to fundraisers or sell for the library fund, etc. I think it was 200. It might have been 500, but it was a lot of basketballs. And after Bob Knight left, I may have told this story just last week, but Mike Davis did the same thing. The gentleman that oversaw this program carried it on with each respective coach. And when Kelvin Samson arrived, they said, hey, coach, just so you know, welcome to Indiana. We're happy to have you here. We're looking to do great things. One thing that I know is a little bit unique, but this started with Coach Knight and then explained the program. And Kelvin Samson said, well, what are you going to pay me for it? And they said, well, I understand that, and it is unusual, but it's just considered kind of one of the charitable things of being the basketball coach at Indiana. And again, this started with Coach Knight. And Kelvin Samson, as I'm told, said, am I Bob Knight? I'm Kelvin Samson, and I'm going to get paid. You're going to pay me. And every ball that goes out, I get a cut of that. Just little things like that, right, of kind of not reading the room. But there is no denying, even with that, and that arrogance is what did him in, because when he came from Oklahoma, he was already being investigated for, and yes, I realize it was something now that is not even in the grand scheme of things. It's the equivalent of driving 42 and a 40. I get that. But he was being investigated for impermissible phone calls and contact while the head coach at Oklahoma. And before the NCAA could rule on that against Oklahoma, he left Norman, left Oklahoma to pick up those pieces, and came to Indiana. And then at Indiana, when Bob Kravitz asked him about that, and he said, that's a rule we just didn't take seriously. Not, that's a rule I didn't understand. That's a rule we didn't take seriously. Thus admitting he knew it was a violation. But what happened after that is something that I think people forget. But what's happening now with Kelvin Samson is, I think, something actually that's good for Indiana and Purdue. I'll explain with that on the other side. And Mike Chappell, by the way, talking NFL Draft and Colts, joins us in 18. Musical artists played over the course of the show from here on out are either from Houston or Florida. So the thing where I think people are, and I'm simply saying this because I saw a lot of this over the weekend, a lot of it. And I understand it. I mean, I'm saying this for the sake of clarity as opposed to condemning anybody or coming down on anybody, because I do understand it. It's been a while. Kelvin Samson is a tremendous basketball coach. I don't think anybody disputes that. Kelvin Samson represents on the basketball court, his teams represent about everything that you would want from your team. They play hard. They play hard from the opening tip to the final buzzer, and they never count themselves out, as evidenced on Saturday night. Absolute credit and kudos there. Nobody has ever denied that Kelvin Samson is an elite-level basketball coach. And, truth be told, Kelvin Samson may be a decent guy now. I mean, I don't know. It's been 20 years since he was here, essentially. He was really arrogant at the time that he was the coach at Indiana. But, you know, I mean, people change as they get older, and he's a grandpa now. And, you know, and his players clearly have a great compassion and love for him. And the way that they guard and the intensity with which they play and their ability to shoot the basketball and move the ball around. I mean, Houston made some plays late in that game that, and they did it against Purdue. They beat Purdue with coaching. Now, that's not to say he outcoached Matt Painter. I don't mean it that way. But in the final play of that game, when Houston had to inbound the ball against Purdue, they immediately had the presence of mind as a coaching staff to go back and recall a play they saw where Houston played Michigan State, or actually, a play that they saw where Purdue played Michigan State, where Michigan State got Purdue on a bait and switch, basically on an inbound play. And Houston learned from that and had that in their hip pocket in case a situation arose where they would need something like that. And they did, and they took advantage of it.
You know what Houston is, Jake?
Relentless!
They are, in fact, relentless. Tom Allen would agree. He has them snapping just like that, right? Now, here's the thing. I saw plenty of this. I saw plenty from the Indiana fan base of, this is what Indiana deserves for firing Kelvin Samson. Kelvin Samson was guilty of minor violations. Yeah, I mean, in today's NIL world where Cooper Flagg's getting millions of dollars, and Braden Smith's worth $1.9 million per year, and BYU gets a guy that gets $5 million, and another player has it in the contract that he doesn't have to take any classes other than online. And when all of that stuff is going on, people look back retroactively and say, and Kelvin Samson got fired by Indiana for text messages and phone calls. How absurd. And Indiana was left in the ashes. And look what they're doing now. They're on their fourth coach since then. Actually, fifth if you include the interim. Indiana deserves what they're getting for throwing in the towel on Kelvin Samson and throwing him under the bus for something that was a minor violation in the grand scheme. That's the comment that I saw everywhere. That's what I was reading everywhere, and I understand it. It was a long time ago. I understand it. But simply for the sake of clarity, I want to reemphasize this for people. Kelvin Samson wasn't, quote-unquote, fired by Indiana. Kelvin Samson was essentially fired by the NCAA. He was given a 5-year show cause. What that means, essentially, and in its purest form, is the NCAA banned Kelvin Samson from coaching for 5 years. Why do you think Kelvin Samson was an assistant for the Houston Rockets? Clearly, the guy's a great coach, but he couldn't coach in college because he'd been banned by the NCAA. A show cause meaning that if you wanted to get a job, you have to show cause as to why that was your only alternative, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, Indiana might have been the one to terminate the contract of Kelvin Samson, but they had no choice because what was Indiana going to do? Can you imagine if Indiana had just gone ahead and paid Kelvin Samson a 5-year salary just to wait on him to come back? You think people wouldn't be up in their arms about a public university spending a half a decade's worth of payroll on somebody who, due to indiscretions and violations, can't perform the duty that they're getting paid to be performing? No way that would happen in a public university. So Indiana had, I'm not here to carry Indiana's water, but people that think that Indiana fired Kelvin Samson because Indiana was high and mighty and trying to make a point and didn't want a program that had a coach that was bigger than the university because they'd been through that with Bob Knight and this was all part of the karma, is total revisionist history. Kelvin Samson brought with him allegations and investigations at Oklahoma that the NCAA continued to investigate about him when he became the coach at Indiana. They found that he was doing the exact same thing at Indiana, and when they came calling and asking about it, Kelvin Samson lied to the investigators. It's never the crime, it's the cover-up. And in that case, it was the cover-up, and as a result, the NCAA basically said to Indiana, you can keep him if you want, but he's not allowed to coach a game for 5 years. Not 1, not 2, 5 years. Heck, by the time Kelvin Samson would have been eligible to coach again, Christian Watford had hit his shot against Kentucky that's still being celebrated. So Indiana had no choice. So the talking point of it's karma for Indiana doesn't hold up because it was the NCAA that told Indiana that he had to go because he was banned from coaching for 5 years. Now, the one thing that his teams do now, and I think Purdue didn't have to learn this. Purdue was already aware of it. But one area where Kelvin Samson is laying a blueprint that, ironically enough, is good for Indiana. And Curt Cignetti did this from the football side of things. When Curt Cignetti took over as the head football coach at Indiana, what he did was he said, okay, I've got a clean slate here and the transfer portal. First thing I'm going to do is go to JMU and get a bunch of my former players to come here, and then I'm going to start getting players that are transfers with experience because I'm going to value experience over potential. And Kelvin Samson's teams are not loaded with one-and-dones. And yes, Cooper Flagg is an unbelievable talent. I get it. Duke has plenty of young talent that was incredible this year. But Samson's team, for the most part, upperclassmen, experienced-laden team. And if you look at what Darren DeVries is doing with West Virginia, with Indiana coming from West Virginia and what he did at West Virginia, and the way that Indiana now through the transfer portal, you get the kid from Davidson. They found that out. 6'10" shooter. It's either Bailey Reed or Reed Bailey. Reed Bailey. Multi-talented player. Guy with 2 first names. That's right. Obviously, they get a high-scoring guard out of San Antonio. They get a point guard out of DePaul. What do those guys all have in common? Veteran players. You're building your roster with guys that know how to play and have been around a while and have experience. That was the Curt Cignetti model, and look what it did for them in football. Look at the Matt Painter model at Purdue. What does Purdue have? Trey Kaufman-Wren, Braden Smith, guys that have been there for a while and have the experience, and that still, even though Purdue is now going to have to use the portal because they've lost some players to it, it still is the mold and the culture, quote-unquote, of Purdue basketball is that of maturity and experience. And I think that's one thing you can learn from Houston. They're in this position because they're mature, experienced, and they play hard. But the thought process that Indiana never should have relinquished that is not valid because Indiana did not have a choice. Talked about the NFL draft. Mike Chappell going to join us 5. More on that. Telling you, man. I was talking to listener Chris yesterday about, and it came up, the Leonard Skinner question of what's their signature song. And I realized Sweet Home Alabama is the one that, for a while there, certainly was the most recognized, but Freebird's like an anthem for an entire genre. And when I said that we're doing musical artists associated with Houston and or Florida for the rest of the show, immediately everybody's like, Freebird! Got to request Freebird, right? Joining us now on...
Are we talking about this Freebird, Jake?
Okay, thank you. Eddie flipping the... Actually, that's not a Freebird because you flip that to me, it comes with a cost.
Well, see, it's not on camera. Nobody has proof that I actually did it.
Well, all the proof I need is right here, buddy, locked in this memory. And I got news for you. This memory is well aware when people write checks that I have yet to cash.
Okay.
Joining us now on the guest line, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so. You hear him, of course, or see him. Well, you hear and see him. On CBS 4 WXIN Fox 59, Mike Chappell, the dean of writers when it comes to the Colts. Chap, draft is upon us within the next 2 weeks, and I was telling Eddie, and I want your thought on this. It seems to me like this is a draft year where the chatter and the buzz has kind of been muted a little bit, and I think that's because we don't have the proverbial, 5 quarterbacks that all could go towards the top in that conversation. When the top player sometimes is a defensive player, or the 3 of the top 5 picks could be the non-quarterback position, it does seem to take some of the wind out of the sails of nationwide draft conversation. Am I off base there?
No, I think it's right. I mean, it's there's not been groundswell over Cam Ward. Everyone's convinced that he goes to Tennessee at 1, but it's not like, and man, this is Andrew Luck, this is Peyton Manning, this is Trevor Lawrence, this is whomever. It's not quite that at all. The buzz is around the Colorado guys. Travis Hunter, everybody says he's the best athlete, the best prospect in the draft, but is he a corner or a wideout? And then Shedeur Sanders. It's crazy, but this is to be expected. Almost every year, guys rise or fall for whatever reason, which is crazy because they've not played since, January. But I've seen Sanders falling down to 10, 12, 15, and teams trading up to get him at 15. I don't see that happening because the one thing that has been proven through the years of the history of the draft is desperate times call for desperate measures. Someone takes him top 5. They just do, because you don't want to be in 5 years being that team that, you could have had Shedeur Sanders at whatever, and you didn't. You took an offensive tackle who's pretty good, but he's not a difference maker. So I agree with you. But that's nationally. Locally, it does seem to be, and I'm as guilty as anybody of putting blinders on, and I look at a need that I can defend until hell freezes over with this Colts team, and that's tight end. The last tight end they had that was worth a hill of beans was Jack Doyle, who was really, really good, but certainly not a difference-making player in the scheme of 1,000 yards and 80 catches. Although he did that once with the catches. So that's why I think locally we get sort of focused in on one thing, and then I can talk myself into other spots with the Colts. But nationally, whenever it's not, I wouldn't say not quarterback driven, because this is, whenever the number 1 pick is a quarterback, it's quarterback driven. But it's just, there's not that buzz, and failing to have that quarterback, I think that's what you get from it.
Chap, tell me if you agree with this statement. If Shedeur Sanders had the exact same skill set, the exact same body of work, the exact same workouts, the exact same times and measurables, etc., and his name is Shedeur Johnson, and he is not the son of Deion Sanders, and therefore you don't have the apple falling far from the tree or not falling far from the tree in the back of your mind and being tantalized by what Deion Sanders did as an athlete in the NFL, his stock would not be as high. Fair or unfair statement?
Probably unfair. I mean, these guys kind of cut through all of that when I say these guys, I'm talking the NFL scouts and GMs. I mean, you have to look past all of that, and I guess you take bloodlines and how a guy was raised athletically, and I guess personally. I would think that what people have to look past with Sanders is the possible distraction of drafting the Sanders brand.
Yeah.
And I think that there seems like there's something to that. I could just see Sanders going to a bad place that the family doesn't like, and then there being occasional, whether it's social media, whether it's Dion being an asset during press conferences. I don't know, but again, you just can't be driven by that unless it's one where you catch wind that, well, you can draft me, but I'm not going there. The Eli Manning, the rare Eli Manning situation. I just think when the time comes, this comes down to what's your resume in college, whether it was at one school or three schools, maybe more than that, your injury history. Did you play through injury, but did you miss significant time to injury, and how that might impact your availability and longevity in the NFL. So, I think you in your draft room you consider all of this stuff, the chatter and all this, but boy, you just don't pass on great talent. And like with Travis Hunter, it'd be a great problem to have, figuring out how you're going to use him at corner and wideout. And that would be an issue to have. To think he's going to play 60 snaps a game on both sides is ridiculous. It won't happen. But you got to find ways to maximize what you have. So that's what's always cool about the draft. But what's really crazy, again, is what I mentioned, is that the guys that are moving up and moving down that aren't medical related, but because they had a good workout or a bad workout or didn't work out at their pro day, which is, all of those are red flags, more information. But boy, if you just got a guy that your draft room, forget what all the mock draft guys have. If this is a guy that you really love at, in this case, 14, to take him and you say, well, we know what we're doing for us. And the fact that all the local writers believe you need a tight end more than you need air, you don't worry about that. So we'll find out in a couple of weeks. But this seems like this reminds me of 2016, where it was so obvious the Colts needed a center. It just was. And not a lot of people were surprised when they took Ryan Kelly. So in my mind, the only real suspense is whether Tyler Warren is there at 14. Do they move up to get him at 5, 6, 7, whatever? Or do they take Colston Loveland? And if they don't take a tight end in the first round, then I need to know what their plan is at the position, whether it's round 2, round 3. And it's, the further you wait to get a player, he's not the player you would have gotten at 14. So this will be one if they don't take a tight end at 14. I'd really looking forward to knowing what their plan is to position.
It does seem as though Mike Chappell is our guest on the always busy, available to be sponsored guest line, Chap with CBS4 and WXAN. It does seem as though in the last couple of weeks things have been all quiet on the Colts front, which I guess isn't necessarily a bad thing, Mike. But
right.
What are you think the internal conversations, or just kind of the storylines that might be taking place there that, as of right now, we haven't heard as much about, obviously?
Well, it's all internal, and again, they're done with free agency for now. They got the players they wanted, the big ticket guys, and then the guys that fill in the holes down the roster, special teams, and all that. And then at some point you transition to the draft, and that's what they're doing now. All their scouts have been all over the country at these pro days. It's always funny. I always kind of smile when somebody tweets, well, the Colts were at this player's pro day. Well, yeah, they've got scouts, and if that guy wasn't at that pro day, then what the hell was he doing? But now they've got everybody back in town for the most part, and now they're just kind of reaffirming and reinforcing and maybe tweaking their draft board. And this is, I think, where Chris Ballard really goes after his scouts. Why do you like this guy? Convince me. and that's really, it kind of puts the scouts on the spot, but it gives the scouts a chance to really stand up for their guy. And this is why I believe this, and this is what this guy can do for us, and then how it fits on their draft board. So it's, again, whether it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, they transitioned from free agency in the pros to the draft, because it's such an important part of what they do. As vital as Cam Bynum and Travarius Ward was, you've got to hit your draft picks. I mean, you just have to. It gives you – you've got 7 picks. Let's say you hit on 5 of them. It gives you 5 players at very reasonable contracts for those 4 years. And if you hit on your first rounder, that's that much more important. So they've got to find players in the draft. You've got to. That's one thing that I've always argued, perhaps with Chris Ballard's approach, is I understand that free agency is not the be all end all. It can't be. It's too expensive. There's too many misses for the investment. That's why the draft is important, but that doesn't mean you can't add big ticket players through free agency. And we'll see if this works. I hope it does. It was 2 areas they needed, but boy, the draft is your bloodline. And just go back to how this was the extreme, but the inroads that Bill Polian made in his tenure here, with, yes, some high draft picks, of course, but Reggie Wayne was at a 30 or 31. Dallas Clark was bottom 3rd. So you got to hit the main guys that, boy, you can add. Anthony Gonzalez was a mid first round pick, was really good until the injuries cropped up. Joe Adai, you got to hit those guys, and Polian was really good at that.
Adai was really underrated.
I tell you, he was top 3 during my time here. Dickerson's in there, but over the last 20 years, and I think it was a shoulder injury, I think, that ended up doing him in. But he was really good, and you're right, one of the more underrated Colts. Oh, I could name a few more, but Adai really is one of my favorite guys.
Well, he was a good blocker too, right? I mean,
yes.
seemed to be a very selfless back.
Right, he was everything you wanted. And again, I can't remember where he got hurt, whether it was Washington or somewhere, but he hurt the shoulder, and he was never the same. But he was really good. It allowed them to transition from Edgerrin, which was not a small thing to do. So yeah, he's always been one of my favorites.
You know what, Jap? Okay, we're gonna do this real quick. You ready?
Ready. Probably not, but go ahead.
Since they've been the Indianapolis Colts, okay, the running backs for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, Jonathan Taylor is obviously in this mix. You've got a very clear top 5. Edgerrin, Falk, in no particular order. Edgerrin, Falk, Dickerson, Adai, and Jonathan Taylor.
Right.
There are, I think, 2 others that get lost in the shuffle that were pretty darn good. But you say who?
Donald Brown was pretty good. Dominic Rhodes was pretty good.
Oh, I forgot about Rhodes. Okay.
Oh gosh, you mean there's 2 more? In the Indy era.
And listen, I may have revisionist history on 2 of these guys. I may well be guilty of an age bias. I may well be guilty, so I'm going to lean on your expertise here.
Well, when they first got here, you had Dickey and McMillan.
Okay, see, I think Curtis Dickey is one of them.
Yeah, when they first got down, he was only here a couple of years, wasn't he? I
Correct.
Believe. I mean, as far as Indy.
He was an inheritant, right? I mean, he and McMillan both came over from Baltimore.
Yeah.
But I think Dickey, when you look at it, was a pretty good player. Now, I might be biased because I was a kid, right? So obviously everybody's bigger and better in your mind. The other one that I wasn't a kid, I was more a teen, and he didn't play long, and there was a devastating injury that ended it for him.
Rodney Culver? Oh, no, go ahead then.
Albert Bentley.
Yes. Oh, yes. Well, he had the unfortunate of being the lead running back when Eric Dickerson came to town. Yes.
Still one of the greatest headlines. One of the greatest headlines, and I don't know if it was you that came up with the chap. I think it was the Star. Was when Eric Dickerson was sulking and Albert Bentley. Albert Bentley had the benefit of, and this happens with backup quarterbacks. What do they always say? The most popular guy in town is the backup quarterback, right? Because everybody's. Right. So Albert Bentley was the lunch pail runner that was kind of the do-everything guy, and then they go out and they get Eric Dickerson, and Dickerson was unbelievable and fabulous and a star and all that. Dickerson starts sulking, and one of the great headlines of all time was "Park the Rolls and bring back the Bentley."
And go back and look at. I think one of Bentley's best games ever was the first game that Dickerson got here against the Jets or somebody, and he ran for 120 yards. Kind of like, hey, you guys brought in this guy, but don't forget me. And I'm almost positive of this that Albert Bentley's hometown was Immokalee, the same as
I think that's right. That's correct. And he's now he's a financial advisor, I think, in the Miami area.
Yeah, I went 1 year after Edgerrin tore up his knee. I went down the next off season and spent some time with him in Immokalee. He took me over to some apartment complex that Bentley had put together. So yeah, both players were very intent about giving back to their hometown of Immokalee, which is not a prosperous city at all, or town at all, whatever it is. So yeah, Bentley was really good. Another one of those Miami guys. There's something about the U that they bring. They bring players that are ready to play right away. I'm sure it's something that the professional atmosphere, along with other things down at the U. But with Reggie and Edgerrin and all those guys, it's pretty amazing how ready to play those guys were from the start.
Hold on, we forgot one of the great personalities, and I know he's had some challenges, but we forgot Roosevelt Potts. Potts was pretty good, though, right?
He was pretty good. He was. I believe he was their leading rusher, and then they drafted Falk, I think.
Correct. That's correct. He was like a mid 800s yard back, right?
Yeah, and he was a fullback. He was a fullback. And it's funny if I remember right, because he had his problems, and I remember meeting with him out at that, is it a Chili's or Applebee's off of 465 on the west side, and he was coming back from one of his suspensions. Well, not one of it, maybe in the only suspension, but good guy. And he had a daughter that was an elite athlete at, Taylor or Anderson or
and a
somewhere.
son also, right? Didn't he have a son that played? Yeah, one of those. Yeah.
So, but I Rosie was really a great guy. But what was funny is that he's their leading rusher, and they draft Falk. And I'm positive that Rosie came into camp Falk's rookie year just cut. He had dropped weight. He thought, I'm going to give this guy a run for his money. And their intention was, well, no, you're going to be a lead blocker, so maybe a few more quarter pounders will help your career as a blocking fullback.
Back to Applebee's.
Great guy. Great guy. Rosie was a great guy. Is a great guy.
Hey, how soon, Chap, before we let you go, how early was it because it is a guy that I think people forget in the overall ranks of Colts lore. How early into it was it for you that you realized that Marshall Faulk was a special dude?
Not as quickly as Peyton Manning or Edgerrin, really, because he didn't early. I mean, early. Was it in his first game against the Rams? He ran for 144, something like that. It's like he rushed for 100 yards over in his first two games. You knew early, but now Hall of Fame player, no. Edgerrin, you could project, I think, more quicker on Edgerrin. I mean, he comes in and he leads the league in rushing the first 2 years, and would have done it the first 3 years had not the injury happened. Falk was always one of those guys that, I don't mean this to be kind of in a bad way, but when you walk in the locker room, you just see guys that like, holy crap, these guys are they're cut.
Oh, totally agree. Falk was almost like he had like baby fat on him, right?
Yeah, and then he gets out there and he just makes you look stupid. And one of the best, the best thing that happened to Falk was the trade to the greatest show on turf. And we could always argue who made it go. Normally, it's a running back that makes it go. Peyton always told me that the guy that put the Colts over the top first was Edgerrin, and then Dallas Clark was the missing piece. When you get that running back, Bill Belichick, it just drove him crazy. When it's okay if you have to take Reggie and Marvin out of a game. But then you got Edgerrin, and they'd stand back and they'd run the ball 30 times if it worked. They weren't going to force a pass.
Chap, I mean, I covered So I kind of went not with Falk to St. Louis, but very shortly after he was traded. And one of the great trivia questions, here's a good one for you, chap. When they traded Falk, they got a 5th rounder and a 2nd rounder. Do you know who they turned into?
Mike Peterson and defensive lineman wasn't Scioli, was it?
It was Brad Scioli. Yep.
God,
it's the two guys.
Those are I shouldn't remember that. There's things I always tell guys. The worst thing to do is to learn a lot, because once it's in your head, you can't get rid of it. And you get trivia crap on your head that's just floating around.
I know.
With no reason.
Well, you never know when some hack radio guy is going to ask you about it on the air, and you look like a genius, right? But
I have there you go. Not a genius, but smarter than a lot of people.
When I went to St. Louis and Falk was on that team in the Greatest Show on Turf, I mean, they had Oz Hakeem and Ernie Conwell and obviously Isaac Bruce. It was to be honest with you, it was a very similar design by what the Colts used, because you had Torrey Holt that was your behind the defense receiver and the veteran, or excuse me, Isaac Bruce, and then you had Torrey Holt that was your Reggie Wayne, right? He could kind of do both. Right. And then you had Falk, which was like Edgerrin, and they had good tight ends. Ernie Conwell was a good player, and then Roland Williams was a good tight end. But Oz Hakeem, they just could spread it out. But it was all centered around Falk. He was like the bishop on the chessboard. Right. I mean, he could go anywhere, right? He could do anything he wanted to do.
Keep in mind who the quarterback was supposed to be.
Yeah, Trent Green,
team.
Right?
Yeah, it wasn't Kurt Warner. Remember, Kurt Warner was one of the great trivia questions of all time. Is they exposed Kurt Warner to the expansion draft, and the Cleveland Browns could have taken him. That's how much they thought this guy was going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback.
The Cleveland Browns instead opted for Spurgeon Wynn, and the rest is history.
And his is one of those names on that shirt that they have with like 30 names on the back.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right, chap, we appreciate it. Next time we talk, we'll be within 10 days or so of the draft, so we look forward to it.
Looking forward to it. You guys be well.
All right, Mike Chappell joining us on the program. National Championship game tonight. What is it, 8:52 first tip?
8:50.
8:50 first tip.
Eastern time.
Or not first tip, but tip. Do we really think it's going to happen at 8:50?
I think so. They're usually pretty spot on with these things.
So the game ends at what time? Here's a better question. What time does the first note of One Shining Moment hit?
Good question.
Do we have anything to give away? Because I have the best trivia question ever.
You know, Jake, I think we might, actually.
I have the best trivia question ever of One Shining Moment. I'm telling you what, we could give away $1 million on my trivia question.
Whoa,
I have
is that's robbing the genies thing, Jake?
No. Robin doesn't pay up, though.
No giveaways today.
I'm telling you, I have the best trivia question ever. If you want to impress your friends tonight, you want to impress your colleagues tomorrow at the water cooler, the trivia question I'm going to give you on the other side is going to blow the roof off of it and blow your mind. And it has to do with One Shining Moment, which tonight, what time do you think it's going to happen?
I got to think about it.
Over, under.
It's usually, that's the last thing, right?
Over, under, 11:50 p.m. for One Shining Moment.
I will say it will later.
Yeah, I'll go over also. But I have a great trivia question about it next.
drive to the basket. It's down to 7 seconds. You can see the time. Wittenberg. Oh, that's a long ways. Oh! They won it. On the dunk.
That's how it sounded back in 1983 when Houston was stunned by North Carolina State. Tonight, does Houston finally get that elusive crown? No school has been to more Final Fours without a national championship than the Cougars.
I saw CBS flash that graphic up during the game against Duke, and I was like, oh, my goodness, Jake Query's probably celebrating right now seeing that graphic.
Did they mention the two schools that would become the co-leaders?
Yeah, they had the next 3 on the list.
Okay, so that would be Illinois, right?
Yes.
Oklahoma? And then who's the third?
I thought it was could have been Nebraska. I can't remember.
Final Fours?
No, not Nebraska. No, it was somebody.
You're thinking of
Right.
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, Illinois. I think it's just Oklahoma and Illinois, is it not? Although, let me think.
They may have not had the same number of appearances, but it might have been to complete the graphic. They put a 4th team who had 6 appearances or 5 or something.
So this is the 7th, I believe, for Houston. Oklahoma and Illinois have 6 apiece. And then after that, you would have to look up Final Four appearances by school, but on what school would be after those two. There's probably somebody with 5, and I'm trying to think of who that would be that has never won it. There are a couple of schools that just randomly have been, been to a couple of them that you would never guess. Do you happen to have a list in front of you of Final Four by schools?
I'm trying to find that.
Now, Eddie, it's got to be very easy to find, right?
You would think.
Here. You starting the clock on me here?
Well, I looked up specifically schools that have made the Final Four but not a championship, so.
NCAA Final Four by school. List of NCAA Division I men's basketball tournament by school. Okay. I believe, of course, then it takes me to year by year, which becomes a whole different thing.
Got it.
We'll find it here. My computer, my chipmunk just went out on a smoke break.
Got it.
Okay, and this is not the trivia question I was going to mention, but so what school is it that would be after those two?
It would be Oklahoma and Illinois with 5, and then
Okay.
you have Kansas State, LSU tied with 4 after that.
That's Kansas State is really surprising. Okay, so tonight, at some point, we are going to see one shining moment. Or is it actually going to be tomorrow morning? Also possible, right? That we'll see. 12:06, somebody else said. Your guess, Eddie, on time, you said is what?
I did not have a specific time. I just went over the 11:50 that you gave.
Okay, you're going with the over.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point we will hear this, okay? Now, I get very melancholic. Am I the only one? There's something about hearing this song that makes me sad and nostalgic. But it's fun. And 2 things that happen every year during One Shining Moment. Number one, and they didn't really have it this year. This is the one thing about this year's that's going to be interesting, is usually there's an unbelievable memory in round one.
Mm-hmm.
There really wasn't one this year, right? But usually when around the time that the guy's singing this, like that, you see some moment like R.J. Hunter hitting the 3. This is from 2015. And you think to yourself, oh, my gosh, I'd forgotten about that. That was 2 weeks ago. It felt like 5 years ago. But we don't have that this year. There weren't those defining round one moments that happen. But I can't be the only one here that when one shining moment comes on, and I know this sounds crazy, and I know this sounds cheesy, and I know it sounds overdramatic, but I really do mean this. And maybe I'm the only one. But I think I've told the story before that when I was a kid, I used to have to do a medical procedure where I would have to stay up all night. It was a sleep-induced test that I would have to do each year annually. And my mom...
Is this why you're such an
insomniac?
Yes.
You would think, right? No, and it was brutal because you couldn't have caffeine, you couldn't have food, and you had to stay up all night for this sleep-induced test, and it was brutal because, I was so tired by the time I would have to go in. It was terrible, to be honest with you. But my mom would always schedule it on the Friday of the opening day of the NCAA tournament so that way, well, by design though, Eddie.
Yeah.
It was
That's
brilliant.
Smart.
It was brilliant because what she would do is she would tape, when I was at school on Thursday, she would tape the first 2 games that would take place. And then when I had to start staying up all night, of course, the games would go on until midnight from the Thursday night opening games. And then she would put the tape in of the afternoon games, and I would watch all of those until 4 or 5 a.m. and then fight through until I had to go to the doctor at 8. But
would you be able to do something like that in today? Like in today's world? Would you be able to tape a game from earlier in the day and then watch it that night?
No, you would have to make a concerted effort to block out social media and things like that. You still had, trust me, as you were watching the games, as I was watching the games at 8 o'clock at night, they were obviously showing highlights and scores of what happened in the earlier games. So I knew what the scores were going to be. I just would watch them. But either way, the NCAA tournament, and in particular the opening rounds, for me personally, it brings back a very, even though the test itself was tough, a very warm moment with my parents and I and whatever else, because that's what I think about. But I don't think I'm alone. I think the tournament itself brings back for people memories of tournaments of yesteryear and great moments that you saw, or whether you were in college, or whether it was a team you had in your pool, or whether somebody that you were really good friends with went to that school. I just think that one shining moment, truth be told, a lot of people watch it because it brings back this nostalgic, and it's somewhat, oddly enough, almost tough to watch nostalgia, because there's a little bit of a melancholy there. I can't be alone in my over-analysis of the emotional aspect of one shining moment. I can't be the only one. But here is the world's greatest trivia question. You know what? We're going to, on this program, we're going to have a feature upcoming that's going to be brought to you by Chicago's Pizza, which is, Chicago's Pizza is fabulous because not only is the dough made fresh daily, not only do they have a fabulous salad bar, not only do they have an array of different pizzas, not only do they have a lunchtime buffet, they have the deep dish pizza, Chicago style, they have traditional, they have thin and crispy, you name it. But it also feels still like the old family value pizzeria like you grew up on in smaller towns, in particular, when you'd go in and it was the community's place. That's what Chicago's Pizza feels like. Chicago's the name, Indianapolis is the heritage of it, because it's a locally owned place, 18 locations in central Indiana. And so because we're going to begin doing a segment called the Deep Dish of the Week, where I will opine on something and Eddie will say, Jake, that sounds like the Deep Dish of the Week, and then bada boom, that's your cue to call. And we're going to set you up with a gift card to go in and enjoy the fabulous nature of Chicago's pizza. We're going to kick this off right now where I'm going to give a trivia question, and you can text me your answer if you'd like. If anybody gets this right, I will be so unbelievably impressed. Now, you can text me your guesses at 317-523-9288. That's my cell phone number. And it's not going to be, I'm not going to do this right now, I'm not going to sit here and say, because it's going to be, I'll bet it takes 2 hours before I get the correct answer. If somebody gets this right, I'll be so highly impressed. But the first person to get it right, I will hook you up with a gift card to Chicago's. I've got a couple of them. I will give you a gift card to Chicago's Pizza to kick off our Chicago's campaign. Then we're going to do it this way. Because I know, for example, I was just with a bunch of the owners and managers from Chicago's Pizza, and they're all huge Pacer fans because they're local through and through. They're Indy through and through. The very first ever in the history of the montage of One Shining Moment, the very first player ever shown in One Shining Moment is what at that time future and now former Pacer. What Pacer player was the very first ever shown on One Shining Moment? Text me your guess at 317-523-9288. 317-523-9288. Text me your guess. Has to be between now and 2 p.m. I'll say that because I don't want people to sit there and start Googling through it and finding the answer. Send me your instinctive gut instinct guess, 317-523-9288. The first person to tell me the answer to that question is going to enjoy, as you should anyway, pizza from Chicago's Pizza. It's a fabulous trivia question. We'll get you caught up on who's coming and who's going in terms of the college basketball portal next. music from Houston and Florida over the course of the show. I was deep down kind of hoping and thinking of like Ghetto Boys, Two Live Crew. So far, we've gone with Kenny Rogers, and now what's this?
This is Florida-Georgia line.
Florida-Georgia line. Are they actually now? Are they from the Florida side or the Georgia side? Do we know? I realize it is Florida. So, what if we look it up and we actually find out they're from Arkansas? Florida, Georgia, that style of country, I got to admit, summertime, I'm kind of down with it. I'm cool with it. I didn't used to be, but it does feel like summertime when you hear that. And I can't believe that May is upon us or soon to be upon us, by the way. Tons of great guesses. Tons of great guesses. Wayman Tisdale was a popular guess and a very educated guess amongst our very smart listeners. Because if you think about the history of One Shining Moment, you would know that it would be around that era, theoretically, that One Shining Moment would have begun. The Rifleman Chuck Person was guessed. Another great guess. Came out in 86, right around the time when One Shining Moment began. Derek McKee. Derek McKee was in the Sports Illustrated College Basketball issue of 1987, eating a Big Mac with a basketball in the middle of it. But he was not in One Shining Moment. Damon Bailey, several people guessed. Bailey made an appearance in One Shining Moment, but One Shining Moment had been around for quite some time by then. Obi Toppin, come on. George McGinnis. The only problem with George McGinnis is he only played at Indiana for a year, and I don't believe they made the tournament that year. That would have been in 1972. In 71, sorry. Or was it? He was a senior in high school in 69, so 70 he'd have been a freshman, 71 season. Averaged 30 a game at Indiana.
That was 16 years before the first One Shining Moment.
Correct. Thomas Bryant was guessed. No. Vern Fleming, a lot of guesses. Great guess, very educated guess. Vern Fleming, 84 Olympian. C.J. McCollum. No, but congratulations on the most random guess of all time. Vern Fleming from my buddy Greg Simmons and from Joe.
C.J. McCollum's never been a Pacer.
Excuse me. Terrence Stansbury, somebody said. Greg Simmons said Terrence Stansbury. Great guess. Terrence Stansbury was in the dunk contest in 85 when it was here with the Statue of Liberty dunk as the Pacer representative, but that's not correct. C.J. McCollum was a Pacer. Wasn't he?
No. The one that's in
C.J. Watson. Okay, you're right. I'm thinking of C.J. Watson and C.J. Excuse me. Remember they had two C.J.s on the team at the same time. C.J. Miles, right?
Yes.
That's what I was thinking of. Keith Smart is not correct. Steve Stepanovich, great guess, not correct. Randy Whitman, another great guess, but not correct. Clark Kellogg, Greg Dreiling, not correct. Reggie Miller. It took that long for somebody to finally ring in with Reggie Miller, which is not correct. Jalen Rose, not correct. Sam Perkins, not correct. Vern Fleming getting a ton of... Stuart Gray, outstanding guess on Stuart Gray, who was the McDonald's All-American and High School Player of the Year before going to UCLA. Not Stuart Gray, not Al Wood, not Quinn Buckner, not Dean Garrett. Dean Garrett didn't. People, I said Pacer. Alan Henderson didn't play for the Pacers. Dean Garrett did not play for the Pacers. Keith Smart did not play for the Pacers. Eric Dampier is an excellent guess. The correct answer.
Got a George McLeod guess as well.
The first year of One Shining Moment. Keith Smart is a great guess, and I'll tell you why. Because One Shining Moment, the very first time that it ever aired just moments after Keith Smart's shot. The first airing of One Shining Moment happened in 1987. The first image that was seen was the mascot of what school, Eddie?
Chomp Chomp.
Great guess. No. The first mascot that you see is the Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket.
Really?
And then as soon as the music begins, you see the introduction of the 7-foot center from the University of Florida, who that year eliminated Purdue, and he later was a Pacer at the end of his career. The late, great Dwayne Shensis is the correct answer.
That's how you say that name?
Dwayne Shensis is the correct answer. And Dwayne Shensis, and I'm going to bet you, if JMV is listening right now, JMV, when he comes in today, is going to walk in when he comes in here for the transition here, the crossover, and he is going to say, Dwayne Shensis had the greatest mullet in the history of college basketball.
Yeah, someone in the break room said the Florida mullet.
Yes. He Eastbound and Down, isn't that the show, the former baseball player? He has that level mullet. Dwayne Shensis had one of the great mullets of all time. And we do have a winner, by the way, that we will get on our way to Chicago's Pizza.
The winner have a name?
Somebody said, Jake, I got the answer because you've given it before. I have currently 96 text messages, so once I filter through and can find the person who had the correct answer, and I will let you know the name.
Your mom made 96?
My mom guessed 92 times. My mom's like, come on, Jake. Get on with it here. Who is it? My mom's convinced it was Sam Mitchell. Now, Dwayne Shensis is the correct answer. So Indiana has a couple of players coming in on the transfer portal. That we learned over the course of the weekend. And I mentioned earlier, I think what you are seeing right now from Indiana's standpoint is the fact that, and this is the third time now that Darren DeVries has had to redo a roster. He had to basically rebuild at Drake when he got there. He had to essentially rebuild West Virginia when he got there. And now they are starting to put together pieces for this coming season. And it looks like what he has done is decided that he wants experience over like young potential. Because if you look at the players they have coming in, obviously his son, who's going to be a good player. We already know that. He's a 2-time conference player of the year. You have a redshirt junior, meaning an older player, in Connor Enright, the point guard out of DePaul, who had played for him previously at Drake, so he's familiar with the system. One of the guys that really intrigues me is out of Davidson, Reed Bailey, because he's 6'11", and, again, has played in a lot of games and was a big-time scorer for them, 19 a game, 6 boards a game, and I think can shoot. That's the big thing, is I think that he is actually a pretty good shooter.
Davidson known for their shooting, obviously with Steph Curry, but ever since Curry, they've had really, really good shooters and really good offenses.
And that's what DeVries wants, right? Mm-hmm. Another one that I believe has committed now is Lamar Wilkerson, who Lamar Wilkerson, right? Out of Sam Houston State.
I haven't seen the official commitment there. I think it just sounds like
I thought I saw that he had committed, but he is big-time scorer, right? And maybe it's that he is close and expected to commit. But 20 and a half a game. Smaller competition, I realize, but a prolific scorer. But I think what Indiana's looking at when you really take from the outside observing in is that they're going, obviously with the transfer portal, you're getting experienced players. But it's not like you're getting guys that were right out of. Nigel Pack is another one. I didn't realize that he was, it feels like that was 6 years ago when he got the huge deal NIL-wise to go to Miami.
Mm-hmm.
But he still has eligibility, and he is also potentially on the list for Indiana. Butler got one today as well, correct?
Yes, the kid from Gonzaga, Ajayi. I forget his first name, but Datamata doing a really good job between recruiting and the portal edition so far.
They do have, Butler's got a good class coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, they have one of the better recruiting classes that they've had coming in. And again, you've got to, the problem that Butler's going to have, or the thing that's been a challenge for Butler, is the fact that you've got to get Midwest kids to try to want to play in the East Coast style, or East Coast kids to try to want to come play in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a tough balancing act so far in trying to navigate through all of that. But nonetheless, and then obviously you know that Purdue, you know, the names that have been thrown out there, and then going out and getting a big man to go alongside Trey Kaufman-Wren, but seeing
Oscar
Heidi
Clough.
Colvin notably on their way out.
Did you see Camden Heidi announced he will be playing at Texas?
Yeah, that's I
Very
understand
interesting
that, right?
move.
Well, again, Eddie, here's what it comes down to. I think schools now are going to find what we're going to see is that schools basically are going to spend their money cap-wise, if you will, to use it in a pro term, on 3 players. And then what you've got to hope is if you're player 5, 6, 7, whatever somewhere, you've got to hope that another school then looks at you and says, you could be a top 3 for us, so we're going to give you this money up front, or we're going to give you money thinking that you are going to be one of our nucleus players. And if Texas feels that way about him, then it would be hard for him to pass that up. Pacers, a big win last night. Our friend Dustin
Dopirak.
Thank you. From the Star joins us next to talk about it. Beyonce from Houston, correct?
Yes.
It's funny. I think of Beyonce as New York, but I know it's well known that she's from Houston, but I associate her with New York. I don't know why. Joining us now on the program, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so. You read his work in covering the Indiana Pacers, a huge win last night in Denver for the Pascal Siakamless Pacers, as they made tons of plays down the stretch that we will get to. Our friend from the Indianapolis Star, Dustin
Dopirak.
joining us. Dustin, if you were to rank Pacer wins on the season, that is top 3 or top 5, correct?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you could rank them different ways. I mean, I think you still look at that win in Minnesota on St. Patrick's Day as the most improbable, just considering all they were missing. But is that the most relevant? But this one's definitely up there. It's late in the season, and I think also it's one of those. It might be the last kind of real, full strength, everybody getting after an important game that they play before the postseason. So yeah, I think it's definitely up there. It's the best Western Conference team they've beaten on the road all year, and I think had to come back a little bit, had to sustain an incredible Joker triple double. It's definitely up there. I think the comeback in Cleveland was a big one. After Halliburton got hurt, was kind of experiencing some groin tightness, being able to rally back and still win that game, I think was impressive. I think there's the Boston win, I think, is impressive. But yeah, no, it's definitely got to be top 5, I would say, for sure.
Okay, I want to go to a couple of players that I thought were really big last night. So I'll just put it actually in your camp here. Player of the game last night was who?
I'm gonna say Miles. I'm gonna say Miles Turner. 3 blocks, 24 points, and it seems weird because Joker has this massive number, but I mean I think he did kind of.
Well, I mean
wear
for
him
the
out
Pacers.
For the
Pacers.
For the Pacers.
Yeah,
that's what I meant. Miles, Tyrese. I mean,
sorry, I thought you were
Tyrese
saying Jokic. Yeah, my apologies. Go ahead.
No. Miles, Tyrese. I mean, Andrew Nembhard, I think, is sneaky in there because he hit some big shots, even though he's 0 of 5 from 3. I think Halliburton was interesting because, I mean, obviously he only takes 1 shot. But this was definitely different than other games he's had where teams have tried to take him out, and he has resorted to kind of passing the ball first. In other scenarios, I think he's been more passive in those things. And I think in this case, he really sort of forced the Nuggets to commit 2 guys to him, and before he moved the ball, made sure he had 2 bodies after him, and that there was, kind of an open guy to find, rather than in some cases earlier this season when he's been shut down, just letting 1 guy kind of take him out of the game, and he made sure that the Nuggets were committing 2 guys before he started moving the basketball, and I think that ball movement really led to them, scoring as much as they did and shooting as well as they did. So he's up there. Jarris Walker made some huge shots. TJ McConnell made some huge shots. At the end of the day, I come down between probably Miles and Halliburton, but Obi Toppin played, fantastic low, especially in the first half. There's Nembhard again hit some big shots. Aaron Nesmith hit some big shots. There's a lot of guys you could put on the list for that one. Sure.
To your point, Dustin, Miles Turner, and in particular when Miles Turner, and I've always said, I don't know that there's a player on the roster. Halliburton would be the obvious other answer here. But the way that the Pacers want to play and the way that this roster has been built is predicated so much on what Miles Turner brings, which is starting transition by rim protection and then trailing and being, if you don't get something off the break, you kick it back out to Turner, who's coming down and getting a 3 off the top there. But in addition to that, being able to bring other teams big out away from rim protecting areas, because you have to be aware of where Turner is. Why do we not recognize the contribution there? And I don't mean me and you. I mean, would you agree that for whatever reason, he is always the favorite whipping post of the fan base, and yet I think he might be the most critical element of who they want to be?
Yeah, I mean, he's up there, and I think the reason why that people get critical is there are other things. Like, he does a lot of things that centers don't always do well, but there are things that a lot of centers do well that he is not as good at as some other guys. And I think that's And I think fans want to see your center be bruising and push people around, and they think if you're losing, basically like if you're losing on the glass, then like what's the point of you as a center? You're supposed to throw guys around in there, and they want to see that when the ball goes up, you're winning those box outs. And those kinds of things. I mean, he's not a terrible rebounder, but he's not a plus rebounder by center standards. But he's good at so many other things, and he's also not dominant on the block. It's not like, he's pretty good when he gets a good matchup. If you switch a guard onto him on the pick and roll, he's generally going to be able to punish that person. But when he's going straight up against another 5 on the block, he's not winning a ton of those. He does win some, but if you're just throwing down in there, he's trying to get a turnaround hook shot on the block, like he's not necessarily great at that. And I think if you want to see a traditional center, those are some things that you want to see. But to your point, like he's so good at the things that not everybody's good at. He's having the best 3-point shooting season of his career in both terms of volume and in terms of percentage. And he is. It feels like, and Miles has said this, he thinks he's getting cheated out of blocks, and he might be. But, I think he's like second in the league. Obviously you take out Wembanyama because he's not going to qualify for the number of games. But, I think he's, among people with a qualifying number of games, I think he's second in the league in blocks. And that's still less than he was at his prime at his peak, I guess, when he was in sort of his mid-20s and battling for, block shot titles. I think he's still sub 2 blocks per game, but he's right there at about 1.9, and he's doing a really, really good job of rim protection. I think even if his numbers aren't better, I think he's been better at it. He's just been more consistent at getting a lot of block shots or altering a lot of shots than he's been in the last couple of years. And I think he's taken a tick up defensively. So I think it's just a case of there are things that you see from a lot of other centers that you don't see from him, and that I think in the eyes of fans, sometimes they get more frustrated by what they're not seeing that's typical than what they are seeing that is atypical.
Okay, here's another thing, Dustin, that I mentioned earlier, and I want you to expand upon it or tell me certainly if you disagree.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put it to you, I guess, in question form. Have we now seen enough? Are there enough precincts now reporting that we can conclusively say that the awkward teenage braces wearing years in the professional career of Jarris Walker are over with, and he has now arrived as a legitimate top 9 player in rotation that can be relied upon for quality minutes more often than not?
More often than not, probably, but he's still in the awkward teenage years, I would say. I don't think the braces are off yet. I think you're starting to see the teeth come together and the gaps close, but I don't think you're seeing them all in line. I think you still see some moments where he forgets where he's supposed to be or gets thrown off by something or doesn't have all the pieces together. But, you're seeing the growth. You're heading towards the end, but no, all precincts aren't in, and if I think the teenage years thing is very apt, obviously, because he's just is he 21? I think there's still some growth to be made there, but he's strung some really good. He's strung some really good performances together, and I think going in right now, the way Ben Shepherd's been struggling a little bit, where he was obviously so reliable last year and was so reliable at other points this year. Obviously, he's just not shooting the ball very well, and you need that last piece for him to be as effective as he can be. As much as he has kind of a limited number of things that he does, but he just does them well. He's got to be able to shoot it, and if he's not shooting it, he does cost you a significant amount of value. So I think Walker has clearly been the more valuable player lately. But there's definitely growth there. I think he's doing a better job defensively. He's sharper in his rotations. He's sharper in kind of understanding, what to do when there's a switch, what to do when there's a scramble. I think he's getting better at that. He's making fewer mistakes, but you still see him. He's not done with those entirely. But the growth is there, and obviously he's shooting the ball phenomenally well. Is that going to be there forever? I think he made huge improvements in his shot last year. I think he was at 40% in both the G League and in the regular season NBA games he played. But you saw some slumps from him this year. He's picking it back up. He's been fantastic over the last couple of weeks. But is he always going to shoot that well? Probably not. At some point, water's going to find its level, and you're going to have a better sense of where he really is. But yeah, he's getting there. He's definitely getting there. There's real progress, but he is not done with overall gawkiness and awkwardness in the teenage stage of being an NBA player.
Magic number is 2 for Indiana to secure the 4 seed. For those unfamiliar what that means, any combination of anytime the Pacers win a game, that number gets reduced. Anytime Milwaukee loses a game, that number gets reduced. Meaning, seems to be very, very, very high odds that Indiana will lock up the number 4 seed. Does that flexibility allow them, Dustin, and do we see that we're going to see more of the Pascal Siakam rest, for example, and that Rick Carlisle will try now to get rest and relaxation for other players before the postseason begins?
I mean, yeah, certainly. I mean, obviously, you want to get it locked down, though. I mean, you don't want to play around on Tuesday and run like you don't want to mess around and run the same lineup you ran against the Timberwolves in that game. Again, remarkable that they won that game, but you're not chancing that yet at this point. But I do think you look for rest for Siakam, but I mean, I think you might look at it as a situation of if you just put this one away tomorrow night against Washington, if you just take care of business there, then you can rest, some of those guys the rest of the way. Because you could pull it off. The Bucks play the Timberwolves. The Bucks actually play the Timberwolves, tomorrow night. So if you get a Timberwolves win over the Bucks and you beat, you beat the Wizards, again, one of the worst teams in the league, I think the worst team in the East at this point still. If those two go down, then you're golden the rest of the way, and you've got 3 games where you don't have to play anybody if you don't want to. I mean, I don't know that they'll rest everybody for all 3 games. There'll probably be some guys that they want to maintain a rhythm, but you could be locked in after Tuesday. And so I would say, I mean, it's really important to just make sure you get that win, put yourself in a position, to put the thing away and be done with it for good. And so, I mean, if you have to play them Thursday, you have to play them Thursday. And you're hoping, again, by that point, that Cleveland doesn't have anything to play for. That by that point, they're locked in the 1 at the East, and they're in a position where they can't catch Oklahoma City for a home court throughout. And so you might, by Thursday, have an even easier opportunity, but you want to make sure you get it done, and just make sure you're not playing around with it. I think they do still consider the 4 seed really important, that it is really important to be able to host in the first round as opposed to have to play in 4 on the road. So they're close to doing it, but if they clinch and they find themselves with not a lot, nothing to material to play for in the last 2 or 3 games in the year, then obviously they're going to rest some guys.
All right, Dustin, who you got tonight, Florida or Houston?
I got Florida. I mean, that's kind of who I picked from the beginning, but I think it's going to be super tight. I mean, it's going to be super tight. I mean, Houston is just and just the way they beat Duke really just tells you everything about like how they play and why they're tough and why it's difficult to ever really put them away, because they're just so tough defensively. They're so gritty, and you still see it. I mean, like it is kind of sometimes amazing. I mean, how often you see teams really bring that full court trap at the end of games. And you would think it's coming, but it still seems like even great college teams still managed to fall apart against it, and Duke obviously did.
You know what's funny?
So Florida could obviously blow that.
When Duke late in that game, and I can't remember the exact timing or sequence of it, but so I know what it was. It was right before the flag missed shot, right? That would have theoretically won the game or put them up 1. Duke had the ball, got it across the midcourt stripe, and then called timeout to set up a play. And I immediately thought to myself, I don't know that I'd call a timeout because I don't want to have to inbound against these guys.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they were, what I mean? Like, they were inbounding the ball, and it was like dodgeball, man.
Exactly. I mean, they were just so swarmed, and it was just so difficult for them to get it in. And you've seen that. I mean, like, you've seen that on occasion. You can see what teams can do at the college level and really dial up that pressure. And the fact that it just seems like, on the flip side, on offense, college players just still seem to struggle with this, even the best ones. And I've certainly seen many an Indiana team collapse down the stretch against pressure like that. And it's really hard to come back when you're down 10 trying to do that, but you absolutely put a lot of fear into teams doing that. And you've seen a lot of teams either collapse or come very, very close to it. And you certainly saw just Duke fall apart against it. Houston's a tougher overall defensive team than a lot. I mean, they might be the best. I think they're the best defensive team in the country. And yeah, I mean, like, they're trouble. And I think Florida's still really good. I think it's come down to a couple of possessions. I've got Florida winning, but I mean, Houston winning this thing, it would not surprise me one bit.
Do you think in any way that I'm curious the mindset, Dustin Dopirak is our guest from the Indianapolis Star, the mindset of a professional player. Jarris Walker is still young enough that he is pretty, obviously he should be a junior at Houston. as the kids call it FOMO, the fear of missing out. Do you think he gets any of that in seeing his brethren from Houston playing for a national title?
I mean, probably. I haven't asked, but I mean, I did notice. Obviously, Houston won the region in Indy, and I saw like not long after that game ends. I saw. I mean, Jarris was on the floor in a Houston Letterman's jacket, giving Samson a hug. So, I'm sure he notices it. I mean, I'm sure it's certainly different when you're still playing and you're going to be on a playoff team and it. I mean, so there's probably less of it when it's, you've got your own thing going on and you're making, a little bit south of $10 million a year. It's probably less FOMO in that case, but I'm sure he's seeing it and thinking, man, that would be cool. Like that would be really awesome to get a part of. And I think they got beaten in the Sweet 16, if I'm not mistaken. The year he was in there, I think the previous year, I think they were a Final Four team. So it probably does. He probably does look at it and say, man, this would be really cool. But, he also knows that he's going in for an even bigger tournament in a couple of weeks.
Pacers in action. It's tomorrow night, correct?
Yep.
The Washington Wizards, correct?
Yes.
Do you think the average guy on the street can name 5 Wizards, not named Harry Potter?
I mean, certainly not that are going to be available and playing in this game.
I mean,
like an average guy who knows the NBA will probably be able to say Jordan Poole, and then he'll be like, okay, well, all right, like Corey Kispert's still on the team, right? Yeah. Didn't they get Marcus Smart? They did.
Is Koulibaly's there, right?
Koulibaly's there, but he's not playing. Probably not. I don't know. I haven't looked at their injury report. I'll certainly see it today, but I mean, he didn't play in the last one. So yeah, I don't know who's actually going to be available to play basketball, but not 5 Wizards. No, certainly not 5 Wizards. I don't even remember who started in the last game, and I just saw them. Like,
I mean, it's got to be right now. It's got to be the most obscure franchise in the NBA, right?
It's up there, but I mean, you should have seen what Utah did the other night. I mean, like they're all. I mean, like. Or Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte had a guy in their rotation who played for the Greensboro Swarm in the on the same court in the G League playoffs on I think was it Monday afternoon, and so or Tuesday afternoon or whatever it was. So those like you are certainly seeing the value of the tank. I mean, none of the tanking teams seem to be messing around. Everybody seems to understand the assignment down the stretch.
By the way,
and obviously the Pacers got a couple of those.
Do you know why the Swarm would be called the Swarm, assuming that they're the G League team of the Hornets? Do you know the correlation between the two, historically speaking?
That Hornets swarm people?
Well,
Go on. Okay.
It was, and I always forget, Dustin, and I apologize. I believe it was the Civil War. It may have been the Revolutionary War, but I believe it was the Civil War. But there was a general of the opposition that when he was bringing his troops into the area that is now Charlotte, he wrote back in documentation of the power of the opposition by saying that when they approached the area, they came upon them like a swarm of hornets.
Wow.
That's why Charlotte would be the Hornets and Greensboro would be the Swarm.
I had no idea that was true.
Yeah.
That is entirely new. That is entirely new to me. I did not know that at all.
Here's the thing. I have like 8 things that I know, and on this radio program, because we only have 116 listeners, 9 of which have the last name of Query, I'm able to rotate those 8 through periodically, and people think it's new information, but I'm actually just recycling something I said earlier.
You've been leading on that for like decades. Yeah,
that's correct. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to start taking notes of them, and I should have several by now.
That's right. One of which, one of the anecdotes that I'm the most proud of about this radio program is I learned how to say your last name, and I did so by having you record it so that we can play it anytime I mention Dustin
Dopirak
from the Indianapolis Star.
Exactly.
All right, Dustin, appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thanks so much, Jake.
All right, joining us from the Indianapolis Star, it is Dustin Dopirak. By the way, I'm excited about this. Tomorrow before the game, I'll have to look at the specifics on where it is. I mean, this is not like some public thing, and it's not a huge thing, but this is very cool. Mark Robinson is a guy that was a member of the Indianapolis Star and news staff, the Star primarily, who's also worked in auto racing, really good guy. And Mark and his wife came up with, I believe they are the two that came up with this idea. There is an organization called ICANN, which is, I'm going off the top of my head, I believe that stands for either Indiana or Indianapolis Canine Assistant Network. and that is for people who need a canine companion to help with things around the house, whether it be a senior citizen, whether it be somebody who, medically speaking, needs a dog to help out with, picking up things and things like, retrieving things. And the ICANN organization is fantastic. They typically use golden retrievers or labs, I think, are the kinds of dogs, but that's kind of irrelevant. But it's a very detailed process between when a puppy is, and it's not an inexpensive process, of when a puppy is selected, and then they determine whether or not they have the temperament and the ability to learn the different commands. Then they go through the whole training process, and they work with them in different capacities before they finally then are partnered with the person that they are forever going to benefit and help out in life. And David Benner, who is a friend to everyone and was the longtime Pacers media relations guru, and prior to that, David Benner had worked as, of course, a writer for the Indianapolis Star. When David passed away, Mark Robinson, knowing that David Benner was a beloved dog dad, I mean, he loved his dogs and was a huge pet proponent in general, but certainly of dogs. I believe it was Mark that, if it wasn't Mark that came up with this idea, it was Mark that then took the bull by the horns on the idea. But Mark Robinson reached out to a number of people that were friends of David. I've mentioned before the luncheons that Robin Miller would put together at IREAs, and the dinners that we do at the holidays and of the Star alumni. And Mark came up with the idea because the dogs, it is not inexpensive, all of the training that I just mentioned. So Mark and his wife raised the money through a number of us that were professional colleagues and friends. That is, believe me, it's synonymous. If you were a colleague of David Benner's, you were a friend of David Benner's. Came up with the money and the donations that we raised to fund one of the dogs in the ICANN network and then name him. So they named the dog Benny after David Benner, and he is now, Benny has gone through his training and gone through his graduation, and Benny is now ready to become a dog that is going to better the life of somebody in the assistance. And for those of us that were part of the fundraising to be able to send Benny to college, if you will, and pay his tuition, we get to meet Benny tomorrow before the Pacer game. So Mark is going to bring Benny by for all of us to meet. I think Dana's going to do a story on it for the Star. That part is kind of irrelevant, but it's very cool to think that knowing David's love for animals, for that matter, my love for dogs for certain, but also knowing of the fabulous work that the ICANN network does, and having been a part of different fundraising and awareness efforts about the organization over time, to be able tomorrow to meet Benny is going to be very, very cool. Very cool, and certainly look forward to it. The Pacers and Wiz tomorrow night, and again, the magic number is down to just 2. We have an update of something between Eddie and myself. It does involve listeners, and it involves where Eddie already is doing victory laps. I'll tell you what it is next. By the way, the Dwayne Shensis trivia question that I asked earlier of what then future and now obviously former Pacer is the one that was the very first player ever seen in one shining moment. Mace got the correct answer. Mace Chope was the first one to chime in. He did so at 1:41.
Congrats.
So Mace will get a gift card to Chicago's Pizza. Somebody else is like, wait a minute. Check the timestamp. And I understand it. Check the timestamp. I chimed in at 1:45. But 1:41. And it looks like that's right around the time I asked the question.
Thank you for listening as well.
Very impressive. Mace, thank you. To both. Thank you for listening. Okay. One of the fun things that we do on this program, I shouldn't say one of, it might be the only fun thing we do on this program. We came up with a game to be played between myself, Eddie, and a listener. That listener is Chad. And the way that we did it was I picked on Major League Baseball's forecast at the beginning of the year of teams that were prognosticated with an over-under that was below the 500 mark. And you got to pick one team from the top half of that group and one team from the bottom half of that group with the combined win total at the end of the year with your two teams, winning you this fabulous bet, which is going to be a prize to be determined later. Probably beer somewhere, or Diet Coke's perfectly sufficient. Chad, we gave the first round of picks. He went with the Cincinnati Reds and the Colorado Rockies. As of right now, Chad has a grand total of 5 victories. Now, the Reds, Eddie, what we know is this. Not bad pitching.
No.
Not bad pitching. But they were 2 innings away from history. And this is what peeves me. What ticks me off, what chaps me, what runs my hide raw. I don't even know if it's a phrase. I just made it up. Is when people don't respect history. I love history. Love it. And the Cincinnati Reds, no team in the history of Major League Baseball. How many Major League Baseball games have been played in the history of the game, would you guess?
Gosh. I have no idea.
It's got to be millions, right?
Yeah.
No team in the history of Major League Baseball that we know of has ever lost 1-0 in 4 consecutive games.
Mm-hmm.
The Cincinnati Reds are down 1-0 in like the 7th inning against Milwaukee, I believe it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the hell are the Brewers doing?
Excuse me?
What are they doing?
What are you talking about?
You're up 1-0 on the Reds. Reds aren't scoring. We all know they're not scoring, right?
Okay.
You're up 1-0 and you have a chance. You have thousands of people that have showed up at this game hoping to see history. Everybody's excited. It's like last year when the White Sox were going for the record for most consecutive losses, and the entire crowd is there. They're wanting to see the loss. They want to see history. So you have all these folks that showed up in Milwaukee. Bernie the Brewer's there. The hot dog fella's there in the suit and the Polish sausage and the races, and everybody's excited. Everybody's geeked out. Everybody's ready to go.
The Presidents? Is that them? No, that's the DC.
No, that's DC.
Come on, Edward.
So 1-0, the game's in like the 7th inning. The Brewers are 2 outs away from history of being the very first, of delivering the very first 1-0 4 sweep in the history of Major League Baseball. And they got to go and hit a 2-run homer and go up 3-0. What are we doing here?
Well, the Reds ended up scoring, Jake, so it's a moot point.
No, the Reds scored because the Brewers hit the 2-run homer and then the Reds were motivated. If the Reds had known, if it was 1-0 and the Reds knew that they were now like 6 outs away from history, they ain't swinging the bat. They regard history. The Reds understand and respect history. You go to that new stadium they have, I say newer compared to Riverfront. You go to that stadium, I mean, it looks like it was put together by IKEA and Legos, right? but they at least have history. They're recognizing the Big Red Machine
Wow.
and the 90 team and the wire-to-wire. The Reds understand history. They've got a Reds Hall of Fame museum. When you go there, you can buy posters of the Big Red Machine. You can later have Pete Rose put a blue dot on all the players that have died.
Well, you can't
There's
do that anymore.
there's an understanding and an appreciation of the greatness of historical anecdote.
R.I.P. Hit King.
And you can't mess with history. And the Reds and the Brewers screwed the whole thing up. Everybody there is – you can bet your sweet bottom unraw hide. Everybody there is looking at their phone saying, oh, my gosh. They're calling people. Aunt Edna, I know we haven't talked in a while. I understand. No, I'm not calling you to wish you happy birthday a month early. I'm calling to tell you I'm on the cusp of witnessing history. They're calling up teachers. Hello, Mr. Barrett. Yes, this is Jim. I had you in 7th grade social studies and history, and you told me that I didn't respect history back in 1974. But I want to let you know I'm on the cusp of seeing it right now, and I appreciate it. Even Spicoli understood history. I mean, what Jefferson was saying is if we don't get some cool rules ourselves, we'll just be bogus too, eh? He got it.
Class.
He had a respect for history. And these two teams completely dropped the ball. But either way, Reds and Rockies, a combined 5 for Chad. I went with, because I have an appreciation for history. Several years ago, I said, one day we're sitting on the couch, I say to Shannon, let's just pick a baseball stadium and go to an afternoon game in the middle of the summer, a businessman special. Where are we going to go? Let's go to the White Sox. Nobody goes to the White Sox. Let's go to the White Sox. They've got history. A little bit scandalous, but they have history. Let's go to that. So we go to then Comiskey. Then it was U.S. Cellular. Now it's guaranteed rate. Unfortunately, the prices of their tickets are not a guaranteed rate because I paid face value and they were worth $2 an hour later. But I took the A's because of the history for the two of us of going to those games. Or the White Sox, I mean. And then I took the A's on the other side of it because I can respect the fact that they're now playing in Sacramento in a minor league park, and I do respect the history of the Oakland Athletics. Now, those two teams aren't – the White Sox got off to a great start this year. By that, I mean that for the first 3 games of the year, for the first 2, they were 500. But they've won 2 games. So 4-2. The A's have won 4. The White Sox have won 2. Grand total of 6. Chad has 5. Eddie, on the other hand, and I think you went second, right?
I did.
Now, last year, Eddie, who is the baseball aficionado of the group, Eddie last year completely butchered this game.
Yeah, wheels fell off for the Miami Marlins.
But Eddie decides to go with the Marlins again. He's a believer. He doesn't understand the history of the Marlins, which is have a great team, tear it apart.
Yeah.
Rebuild, have a great team, tear it apart.
Yeah, they had 2 MVPs on their team not too long ago.
The Marlins have won 5 games. So, too, the other half of your equation, the Toronto Blue Jays, who just gave Vladimir Guerrero $500 million for 14 years. Whew. They don't respect history.
Ka-ching.
If the Toronto Blue Jays understood history, they would look back at players that get these mega contracts that are over 14 years, and they would ask the Angels how it went at the end for the Albert Pujols era. Or they would ask the Rangers how it went in the end when they were still paying Alex Rodriguez. Or the Rangers, again, I think Josh Hamilton they gave a huge deal to. These huge, mega, like long-time year deals never end up paying off in the end. But nonetheless, he got a 14-year deal for $500 million.
They're working right now for Philly and San Diego.
Harper got a big one, right?
Huge one, and then San Diego with Fernando Tatis.
Okay, let me ask
Manny
you this.
Machado.
How far into that deal is Harper?
Let me look. I'll give you an exact.
His wasn't a 14-year deal, though, right? Wasn't his like 7?
I thought it was 10.
Okay. And he was how old at the time?
13 years, $330 million. That was in 2019.
Okay, so they are not even halfway through that, right?
He is 32 now.
Okay, so they've got 7 more years on that, Eddie.
Yep.
They're going to be paying him at the age of 38 and 39. Bryce Harper's a fabulous player, by the way. Have they won a World Series with him?
Did they win the World Series?
They've not, right?
No, they made it.
Correct,
Lost,
but they've not won the World Series with him.
No.
So they're right now they have to basically now. I mean, they are obviously a very good franchise. My point being, they are starting to exit the window of availability on that, and that actually, Bryce Harper, I always felt like could have gotten even more to be out from a annual salary standpoint. So by the time they're at the end of that, they're not going to be looking to unload the deal necessarily because he's going to still be kind of a value. But players after like 36, 37, I mean, it can go south pretty quickly. And they're in the window right now where they've got to cash in on that. But the Reds, I mean, I really, their pitching has obviously been okay. But, man, can we just not get all of them turbo bats, please?
Torpedo.
Or torpedo bats, I mean, yeah. Which at first there was, for like 2 days, people were talking about how they were going to ban them, and then baseball comes out and goes, no, it's actually great for baseball. Okay. It probably is, right? Because here it is in Indianapolis on the day of the national championship game, and after the Pacers won 2 weeks before the NFL draft, and we just gave like 6 minutes to baseball. Hallelujah. Reds, by the way, in San Francisco tonight. I always like those West Coast games, man, staying up late and watching them.
Giants are 8-1, Jake.
I know. Which is crazy because the Dodgers are, 9-2?
First year underneath Buster Posey.
Oh, that's right. I'm going, I think I told you, my buddy and I are planning on going in July. I'm going to take 1 day off, but we're going to fly out to Sacramento and go to an A's-Reds game in Sacramento on a Friday night, and then drive over to San Francisco and watch Dodgers-Giants on Saturday night at Giant Stadium and fly home Sunday. How about that for a trip? JMV's next. I'm predicting he's going to mention the Dwayne Shinsis mullet, and we'll put a tie on all of it and hand it off to him in just about 10. Eddie, you just mentioned that there is somebody on the north side of Indianapolis that is getting ready to do something that the rest of Indianapolis would applaud, right?
I did?
Mm-hmm. I cannot believe that I did not have any cavities. I'm neurotic about brushing my teeth and flossing my teeth. But it's been a long time since I've had like a deep cleaning of my teeth. And I have to do an hour and a half of that today, meaning they've got I'm assuming my mouth's going to be numb. I'm going to be like Kramer. Well, he said I got to cut out the Skittles. My mouth's going to be completely numb. I'm not going to be able to talk for 3 hours, right?
At least, right?
Can we just go right now and say that clearly Northview Dental is going to become the hero of Indianapolis because they're going to make it so that I can't talk for 3 hours? Now, originally they said, now, would you want to do a morning appointment? Now, can you imagine if I came in here and tried to do the
that would have been fun. You know, I look over, you got half your mouth is just not moving, the other half is, and you got drool falling out.
I don't want
over the lip.
I don't know that I want to get my mouth numbed because the needle in that area is.
Start looking like Matthew McConaughey when you talk.
Yeah, I wonder how much I'm going to be bopping all over the place if I try to do it without. Am I a moron if I tell them at first to try to do it without numbing my mouth? Because I don't think they're drilling. I think they're just scraping.
You should be fine.
You think so?
I think so, yeah.
I don't know. Here's the other thing, though. I'm on the blood thinners.
Oh, yeah.
I got a feeling my mouth's going to be a river.
Blood?
Yes.
Mm.
You remember Mr. Thirsty?
I do.
That's the little hose thing they put in.
Oh, yeah.
That's what Tim Watley calls it, Mr. Thirsty. National championship game tonight, Houston and Florida. And I mentioned it earlier, but I'll repeat it again. I understand and certainly respect Indiana fans that are like up in arms over the fact that Kelvin Samson, like, why did Indiana get rid of this guy? Indiana deserves what they get for firing Kelvin Samson. He is undoubtedly a fabulous basketball coach. His teams play hard, and they defend. And the way that Houston plays is kind of old school, to be honest with you. But for those that, and believe me, I got plenty of these messages and plenty of these inquiries from people. For the folks that are unpleased with the fact that Indiana, like, why in the world did Indiana fire Kelvin Samson? Look at what he's doing. And the violations that he had were ridiculous anyway. Who cares that he made phone calls? But to go back to it, there's a little bit of revisionist history there. The reality is this. The reality is that Kelvin Samson left Oklahoma because Oklahoma was about to undergo a penalty phase of an investigation of Kelvin Samson for excessive contact and non-contact periods with recruits, primarily texting. And yes, these are things now that A, are no longer violations, and B, in the grand scheme of things, in today's world, it's like, really? Who cares?
But it wasn't then, Jake, so I don't.
Correct. And it was not the crime, it was the cover-up. Because when Samson was hired from Oklahoma, he basically was told, look, just because you are leaving Oklahoma does not mean that this investigation is expiring. And in addition to that, we will determine whether or not the penalty follows you versus the university. As I've mentioned 100 times, when he was at the press conference being introduced as the Indiana coach, it was Bob Kravitz that asked him about it, and Kelvin Samson said, that is a rule we didn't take seriously. He didn't say, that is a rule that I didn't understand. He said, I didn't take it seriously. Then, when he was investigated for the same thing again at Indiana, knowing that they were still investigating that wrongdoing at Oklahoma. He lied to the investigators. So, as a result of all of that, the NCAA gave him a 5-year show cause. What a show cause means is you are being banned from coaching college athletics. Now, we could sit here and discuss and debate and jump up and down till the cows come home about the NCAA's legitimacy in that or the absurdity of it or whatever else. But the bottom line is the NCAA is the one that said you are not allowed to coach at an NCAA school for 5 years unless you do what's called a show cause, which is to show us that there is a cause that you have to undergo a job here because you can't work elsewhere, da-da-da-da-da. There's a reason he was an assistant for the Houston Rockets in the NBA. The show cause prohibited him from coaching in college for 5 years. So for people that want to condemn Indiana, and I understand why, but for people that want to condemn Indiana for terminating Kelvin Samson, the reality is that Kelvin Samson couldn't have worked there anyway. Sure, Indiana could have said, we're just going to pay you for 5 years, a non-compete, if you will, for 5 years to sit and do nothing and have an interim coach for 5 years, and then we'll bring you back. Or, as Indiana did, they said, well, okay, so we're done here. They get rid of him. They have an interim. Then they bring in Tom Crean. By the time Kelvin Samson would have been eligible again, Indiana already was – the Watt shot had happened, and Tom Crean had revitalized them back into a program. So I understand the convenience of pointing out that Indiana erred and not retaining Kelvin Samson, except for that it was not Indiana that made that decision. The NCAA made it for them. Is John here today or is he on location? JMV is here today. He will be up next, and he will bring you home until 6 o'clock, get you set for tonight's title game, talk about the Pacers as well. Fully loaded show with JMV on the other side. We're back with you at noon tomorrow, if I can talk. And thank you for listening to Query & Company.